Hola amigos de Importadora Karma, nos encontramos aquí en el Fiesta Americana de Reforma con Guthrie, que es un elemento del grupo de Aristocrats. Y pues tenemos la fortuna de entrevistarlo hoy, está representando a la marca LANEY y pues bueno, vamos a hacer una serie de preguntas. Pues Guthrie, tu carrera ha sido muy amplia, muy extensa, muy memorable. ¿Nos podrías compartir algunos elementos de estos que has vivido tú, algunas anécdotas?
Um, Looking back, I think my favourite thing about the career I've had is just the diversity of different things which I've been able to be involved with. Uh, I suppose the core of what I'm known for is a certain kind of technical rock fusion guitar playing, and it's been fun to do all that stuff, but I've really enjoyed being able to participate in gigs that might surprise people. Like about 12, 13 years ago, I was in a band for about the biggest rapper in the UK, whose name was Dizzy Rascal. And we actually had a really good, I think, 13-piece band. Mm-hmm. And there we were playing all these rap records, but with a real band arrangement. And I got to find out something new about myself and discover a new facet of who I was as a musician, rather than just doing the same thing all the time. And I would say the other gig I have to mention, because it's so unusual, is my involvement with Hans Zimmer, the movie composer. And that all started about 10 years ago when he sent me a Facebook message saying, "I've seen you on YouTube, I would like you to join my band." And I didn't believe it was him. So I think my Facebook reply was something like, "Come on, we both know you're some 14-year-old kid from somewhere. What do you really want?" Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a miracle that he managed to persuade me he was the real Hans Zimmer. But again, I got to find out a different facet of who I am as a musician, because I had to interpret music that on the original recordings had no guitar playing whatsoever. So I felt conflicted. I was honoured to be involved with this, but I didn't want to mess it up by adding guitar to famous soundtrack scores that had already won all these awards and sounded amazing without me. So that was a fun challenge that I thought would be worth mentioning.
Tu estilo de tocar es muy apreciado, ¿no? Con delicadeza, es muy preciso. ¿Cómo obtuviste esta técnica? ¿No? ¿De dónde la sacaste? ¿La estudiaste de algún lugar en especial?
Well, I started a very long time ago. People tell me I was 3 years old when I first started playing guitar, but I honestly don't remember. I just remember how big a guitar was the first time I tried to play it. And it all came about because I grew up in a house where there was a guitar lying in the corner of the living room, and my dad knew about 5 chords. So my introduction to guitar was more like the way people meet folk music. When I think about gypsy jazz players and how they learn, they all start really young, and it's their uncle showing them a chord progression, rather than the other common story, which is a kid reaches the age of 13 or thereabouts and suddenly discovers metal. Okay. So they have this passion for metal and they have hormones coursing through their body, and it's like, I need to buy a guitar, I need to become a warrior. But for me, I just grew up with it. So music, and guitar in particular, just feels like a first language to me. So that meant I was able to just grow up not being able to afford guitar lessons, but at least being able to grow up listening to all the music around me. My parents were always playing vinyl, and I just tried to copy everything I heard. So if anyone considers me something of a chameleon in terms of style, that's why. It's just because I never managed to pick one area of music that I wanted to focus on. I like things about every corner of music, and I wanted to absorb all of it. So I think that's how you end up with a style. You just listen to music and you pick out the parts of whatever you're hearing that really speak to you. It's like, I'm going to borrow that. That's a detail that I could use. That resonates with me. That could become part of my voice as a musician. So I've been that guy randomly, just listening to everything and absorbing the parts of it that speak to me. In terms of technique, that probably comes easier if you start young. I think when someone's really young, they naturally gravitate towards the easiest way to play an instrument. If people start a little later in life, there is a risk that they will be scared of the instrument and think that they have to fight with it, and that leads to you kind of tensing up and having an unnatural playing position, which in the long term makes things more difficult. I've always tried to play things in a way that feels natural and easy.
Ujú,
If you do that for long enough, and then one day you have to speed it up, it's not a big deal.
ujú. Em, el proceso de creatividad con el grupo de Aristocrats, ¿cómo es? ¿Cómo funciona? ¿Cómo es la comunicación entre ustedes?
How do we create music together and how do we communicate musically?
Con el grupo.
Well done, me.
No.
Well, the Aristocrats basically exist because we found each other accidentally at a music show
En
in
el AM.
Anaheim. Yeah.
Ujú,
And we played together for 30 minutes and realized that we naturally communicate well.
ujú,
So it's not something that we've had to design as part of the band dynamic. We've never had to discuss, like, how should we communicate as musicians? The point is that our personalities seem to connect
ujú.
naturally. And
Click.
when we play together, it feels like we've known each other for a long time. It feels like we went to school together.
Ujú,
So we all decided we should recognize this chemistry, because there are lots of people who can play their instrument well, but if you combine them together, they don't always connect.
Hmm.
And when you do find a connection, you should harness it and see where you can take it. So we discovered that we naturally intersect well on the musical level, but then we discovered we live in different countries. So we can't really meet up in a rehearsal room once a week and jam things out. So our system for making every album has been each member in the band writes 3 songs and we write the whole song and we make a demo. Like for me, I'll play guitar, I'll play bass as well as I can. I'm an okay bass player, and I'll program drums as well as I can. I'm a terrible drum programmer. And then I send the MP3s to the other 2 guys. Similar process. They send me their 3 offerings, and we just listen to the MP3s. We try to internalize them. We try to imagine how we could bring our own personalities into the finished recording. And then we book a studio and hope we were right.
Como educador musical, ¿cómo entraste a este mundo de la educación musical y cuál es el consejo que le das a todos que quieren aprender música? ¿El estudio es base o no?
Okay. It's kind of ironic to me that I've done so much teaching because I'm entirely self-taught. Nobody ever taught me. So in a sense, in a selfish sense, I suppose one of my favorite things about the whole teaching process is that it forced me to analyze why I do things a certain way. And in many cases, be it technique-orientated questions or note choice questions, these are things that have just come naturally to me over the years. And being forced to try and work out why I do the things I do has been pretty revealing at times. And I kind of enjoy being forced to understand why certain things work. And when you mention music theory, a lot of people who are self-taught kind of end up with an understanding of music theory on an instinctive level. So they know what works and what doesn't work. They know if a note fits in the scale or not, but they don't know the words for it. So I learned how things sounded before I learned what things were called. I would sit at home and transcribe Beatles albums and learn chord progressions and try and learn melodies and things like that. Then I would go to the library, which is what we had before the internet. We had a paper internet. And I would read about music theory. And often when I kind of unlocked some kind of puzzle, I realized, oh, that thing, I knew that already. I didn't know there was a word for it. So I don't think there's a right or wrong approach for people with regard to music theory, because everyone's brain is wired differently. Everyone has a different method of learning that works best for them, depending on their thought patterns. So I don't want to prescribe a correct way to approach learning the instrument. But I will say this, music theory cannot harm you. It's not possible to know too much about music. The only way things can harm you is if you learn all your theory and think that's enough. It's like, well, I learned all the scales, I learned all the arpeggios, I can play them really fast. Why do I still not sound good? Because the accompanying factor to knowing what you're doing is knowing why you're doing it and having something to say. So I think music theory is like the alphabet. Knowing the alphabet back to front and being able to recite it or type it really quickly is not going to help you to become a good novelist. But if you don't know the alphabet, you're definitely not going to become a good novelist.
El amplificador LFR 212 de LANEY. Porque, ¿qué es lo que te gusta de él? ¿Por qué estás tocando con él? ¿Lo llevas a todos lados? ¿Qué es lo que destacas de este amplificador?
Okay. I've always been a pretty traditional player. I love the sound of an old school valve amp turned up to 11. It's not always practical, and I discovered that about 10 years ago when I started playing with Hans Zimmer. And in that operation, we have an orchestra behind us. And if I brought a 100-watt stack and cranked it up, all of the orchestra's microphones would pick it up, and the sound man would hate me, and I would be fired. So that gig was really the first time I had to adapt and start using digital modelers, because everyone's on in-ear monitors. No one really makes any noise on the stage. Okay. It was a very foreign world for me at first. But I slowly kind of grew accustomed to it and decided that maybe that approach would give me more flexibility in the other musical things that I do. So I've been using fractal modeling units with the Aristocrats for the last several years. And it opened up all these new possibilities for me because we're such a weird band. And we like to pastiche so many different styles. There really isn't one perfect guitar amp that will sound right for every song in our set. So I thought to myself, well, this fractal has 200 and something different virtual amps. Maybe I can get stylistically closer to what we're going for in each part of the set. And in theory, that made a whole lot of sense. But then when we started playing on stage, we have a giant bass stack moving lots of air, and we have a physical drum kit moving lots of air, and then there's me with my little digital box. And I tried all the solutions available. Generally, it's something like a monitor speaker, and you just put a monitor speaker behind you and pretend that's your screaming stack. But it never quite felt like the real thing. And also, I'd noticed from the front few rows of certain gigs, the real guitar heads would get there a couple of hours early and put themselves right in the front row, right in front of the, wait a minute, there's no guitar amp. So they stand there and then wonder why they can't hear the guitar amp. So I thought, I need to find something that feels more like a traditional amp, but still gives me this flexibility. And then LANEY to the rescue. Because these things, I mean, you can tell just by looking at them, they're designed more to feel like a traditional guitar cabinet. So it's the most realistic digital experience I've ever had on stage. And I think those guitar maniacs in the front row are probably appreciating that I'm using these now rather than little monitor speakers. So yeah, I'm really happy that these things exist. And if there's ever been a better moment than now to say thanks to Karma Music for providing these in Mexico, I don't know.
Sí, no, pues sí, muy bien, pues este es lo básico. Guthrie, te agradezco mucho la entrevista, tienes una energía muy tranquila, me gusta mucho, es un placer conocerte, te agradecemos mucho y bueno, hoy en la noche vamos a estar viendo tu show con el grupo de Aristocrats y pues ya estamos muy ansiosos de verlos tocar y disfrutar este show. Entonces nos despedimos para los amigos de Importadora Karma, por favor, nos estamos viendo y nos vemos en la próxima.
I'm going to pretend I understood that.
Porque a lo mejor, que, pues nada, estamos invitándolos a que vayan. El LFR de LANEY, el 212, se encuentra en venta en el Museum Shop Bar en Bolívar 42 en la colonia Centro en Ciudad de México. Así es que vayan, recomiendo toda la línea LANEY, está en exposición ahí. Y pues nada, muchas gracias y nos vemos en el Museum Shop Bar.
What he said. Go visit Karma. They're lovely people. They have at least one of these, and I'm sure they have lots of other splendid things as well. Cheers.
Nos vemos, amigos.